Being weird isn't an aesthetic. It's not neon hair or theater kid energy. Weird is what happens when our expectations break. Our brains are prediction machines, constantly assessing what's coming next. And most of the time, schools train brains to predict nothing that's all that interesting. So when something unexpected happens, a joke lands, a person laughs, a lesson goes in a way that you weren't expecting, our brains don't just notice. Chemically, they light up. These neurotransmitters spike not because something is fun, but because something is new. This right here is the moment that gets labeled weird. The lie that we've all been told for our entire lives is that being weird and weirdness is a distraction from learning. But weird is the feeling the brain labels when something interrupts our pattern of thought. And this interruption, done safely, is exactly where learning happens. These interruptions of novelty, surprise, humor, and deviation, they are all signals, not sins. The brain does not learn by compliance. It learns by contrast, and weird is contrast with a pulse. So when a classroom labels a student weird, what it's really saying is your brain noticed something that we didn't plan for. Welcome back to a brand new season of D-Talk. I'm your host, David They, and D-Talk is your safe space to explore your creativity, cringe, critical thinking, and connection. And this season, season 4, we're doing things a little bit differently. This season is all dedicated to a concept that I've labeled as weird pedagogy. It just means teaching, the act of teaching, to teach. Pedagogue. Pedagogue is the noun, that's the person. I am so excited to share this project with you. It's been a long time in the making, and before we get into all of it, I would like to make my dedication to all you weirdos out there. You know exactly who you are. This is for the kids that were a lot. Too loud, too fast, too emotional, too gay, too interested in the wrong thing at the wrong time. This is for the students who were told they were distracted when they were actually just bored by nonsense. The ones whose report cards said bright, but too talkative. Which is usually adult code for we didn't know what to do with you. This is for the teachers who were told to be more professional, which apparently means less laughing, less warmth, less personality. This is for everyone who looked at a school and thought, this in no way is the best that we can do. So if you've ever been told to turn it down, sit still, stop asking questions, or act normal, let me say this for you. Absolutely fucking not. That's my one F word, so this can still be rated PG-13. You are not broken. You are just incompatible with boring pedagogy. And honestly, that's hot. Let's get into it. D-Talk Season 4 starts now. Okay, you bunch of weirdos. Let's start by naming something, because weird is one of those words that a lot of us use pretty regularly, but almost never define. We say a person is weird, a question is weird, an outfit is weird, a lesson went weird, and usually what we mean is something didn't behave the way we expected it to. In education, weirdness tends to function as a warning label, a signal that a moment, a learner, or a behavior has slipped outside the approved script. And my project here is interested in what happens when we stop treating weirdness like it's a problem that we need to fix and start treating it like a pedagogical signal that we need to pay attention to. For the purposes of this season, weird pedagogy refers to a teaching stance that treats these moments of surprise, deviation, non-linearity in general as meaningful data rather than an instructional failure. And hey, let me be the first to say that not every weird moment is good. Not every disruption is productive. Oh, I'm really bleeding. Sorry, I injured myself with a glue gun, but I made this cool fireplace. Look, now that you're still listening to me. Right, not every disruption is productive, but every weird moment tells us something about an environment if we are willing to listen. One of the quiet failures of schooling is how often weirdness gets attached to a person versus the situation itself. When a classroom moment goes off script, we rarely say, "That moment was weird." We say, "That kid was weird." And once weirdness is stuck to an actual person, this idea of teaching becomes all about management. And that's a boring place to live. Weird in this framework is situational and it's relational. It emerges from the interaction between classroom structures, teacher presence, social norms, and student responses. Educational theorist Deborah Britzman, writing from Queer Pedagogy, reminds us that learning is not a process of smooth alignment, but of disruption, becoming, and unlearning expectations. Weirdness, in this sense, is not evidence that learning has failed. It's often evidence that learning has just begun. And yet, most schooling systems are built to minimize exactly these moments that I'm referring to. Predictability is rewarded. Pacing is prized, and deviation is quickly corrected. As Gert Biesta, it's gotta be Biesta, I should have looked it up. I didn't look it up. As Bert Kiesta argues in The Beautiful Risk of Education, education becomes fragile when it tries to eliminate uncertainty rather than working with it. And weird pedagogy doesn't reject structure, but it resists rigidity when structure becomes more important than sense making. Let me be clear on what weird pedagogy is not. It is not chaos. It is not anything goes. Anything goes. It is not teaching without intention. Weird is bounded. Weird pedagogy is about how teachers respond when intention meets unpredictability. Educational researcher Keith Sawyer describes effective teaching as a form of disciplined improvisation, where educators plan carefully but remain responsive to the emergent moments rather than rigidly adhering to scripts. And weird pedagogy lives in this exact space, not in abandoning plans, but in noticing when plans no longer fit the moment. And here's the line I want to reiterate so crystal clearly before we move on. A moment can be weird, but a person cannot. When weirdness is framed as a pedagogical condition rather than a personal flaw, it can be something that teachers design for, reflect on, and navigate ethically. Parker Palmer reminds us that teaching is not simply a technical act, but rather a relational one, rooted in presence, attentiveness, and care. Weird pedagogy begins there, not with strategies, but with stance. So this is not our time to argue why weird moments matter or how the brain responds to them, who benefits most, or what risks are involved. Those questions deserve their own space, and it is coming, but not yet. For now, weirdness functions as a descriptive category, a way of naming moments when learning slips, surprises, or resists containment. If we can define weird clearly, we can stop pushing it reflexively, and we can stop punishing it and start learning from it. For now, I want you to consider the following questions so we can wrap up our definition of what weird means. When something goes weird in your life, in your classroom, at any time, what is your first instinct? Is it curiosity? Or is it correction? I bet I know what your answer is, you little weirdo. Can you remember a time where you were labeled off task, but you were actually thinking more deeply? And what kinds of weirdness are celebrated around us, and which ones are punished? And if weirdness isn't a flaw, what might it be trying to tell you? Because if we look around our world, weird art is interesting, weird music is innovative, and weird fashion is iconic. School is one of the only places where weirdness reliably becomes a problem. So, Chapter 2. The brain as a prediction machine. Our brains are not filing cabinets, waiting patiently for information to be placed inside of it. Our brains are prediction machines that are looking for patterns and answers. Every moment, it's guessing what's happening next, what we'll see, what we'll hear. And when the guess is right, the brain relaxes. She got it. She's happy. But when it's wrong, the brain pays attention. And this is how perception works. Neuroscientists a good day to have a lisp. Neuroscientists describe the brain as constantly generating models of the world and updating them when reality disagrees. So we are not reacting to the world, we are continuously predicting it and correcting ourselves in real time, which means that learning doesn't start with information, it starts with expectation. When nothing violates the brain's expectation, the brain doesn't panic, but it also doesn't really care. Predictable input fades into the background. Familiar patterns get compressed. This is efficient, but it's terrible for learning and noticing new things. Surprise is the interruption signal. When something doesn't fit the brain's prediction, it goes, hold on, update required. I'm pretty sure we have to update this. And this, I'm so happy that this is all about weird stuff and I can keep in all my stupid comments, weird comments. They're not stupid. I'm still learning this with you. And this moment of holding on to update is where cognition is coming into the foreground, which is what we want in a school. This is why saying pay attention has never worked. Attention isn't something the brain gives on command. It's something the brain earns when its own predictions fail. And this is where weirdness quietly enters the room. Weirdness is not randomness. It's deviation with just enough structure to be noticeable. Too predictable, the brain checks out. Too chaotic, the brain shuts down. But right in the middle, where expectation is challenged but not threatened, that's where learning lives. Most classrooms are optimized for prediction accuracy, not prediction updating. And the brain learns the pattern and then just goes into autopilot, which looks like compliance, but feels like boredom. When something unexpected happens, the brain doesn't experience it as misbehavior first. It experiences it as data. That's why novelty feels so energizing. Not because it's solely entertaining, but because it forces the brain to revise its model of the world. And learning, at its core, is model revision. So when we talk about weird moments in learning, we're not talking about chaos. We're talking about moments where the brain is forced to update its expectations instead of just recycling them. Weirdness is the sound of a prediction failing. And if that makes you uncomfortable, that also might be valuable information. Not me reading you right in the first episode. This is particularly challenging as an educator because when we think of the myth of the off-task student, if a student's brain is predicting the outcome effectively, disengagement isn't defiance, it's actually efficiency. Because once the brain can predict things, attention drops. And by now you may be thinking, but David, if our brains are evolutionarily wired to seek comfort and efficiency and pattern recognition, and you're regularly challenging that biological process, isn't that uncomfortable? And, well, yes. I never said that this would be easy, but I am saying that it is worthwhile. Before we end this chapter, I want you to consider the learning environments that you foster. You don't have to be a teacher to make use of this. You just need to be a leader in any sense of the world. And hey, I would argue that even if nobody else in the world is being led by you, you are being led by you. So let yourself have some weirdness, okay? Don't be so goddamn hard on yourself. And finally, I want you to begin to consider what it could look like when you start designing things for surprise instead of just simple compliance. Okay, Chapter 3, Curiosity as a Biological State. Some people are curious, some people aren't. But when we look at the research, curiosity is not a personality trait. It's a biological state, something that happens to us before it ever becomes something that we choose for ourselves. From a neuroscience perspective, curiosity emerges when our brains detect a gap between what we know and what we want to know. And this gap creates a state of cognitive tension, unresolved, uncomfortable, and compelling. We don't get curious because learning is fun. We get curious because our brain is designed to not like open loops. And when that gap appears, our attention narrows, our perception sharpens, We start scanning for information that might close the loop. In other words, curiosity recognizes our mental priorities in real time. It changes what we notice and what we ignore and what feels urgent. It's so cool. And in terms of teaching, this reframes engagement entirely. If curiosity is a biological response, then disengagement isn't a failure of effort, it's a failure of conditions. When classrooms eliminate uncertainty, overscript outcomes, or rush too quickly to the answers, they shut down the very state that makes learning possible. God, it's upsetting. It's not upsetting. It's just upsetting when you think about the majority of schools. Anyway, curiosity thrives in environments that tolerate ambiguity. It needs questions that aren't immediately resolved and problems that feel ever so slightly out of reach. When we allow confusion to linger, when we don't rescue students from not knowing something, we give their nervous systems time to enter a state where learning can actually happen. This also explains why weird moments work diva, a tangent, an unexpected joke, a strange example. These disruptions create micro gaps in expectation. The brain notices the mismatch and leans forward. Curiosity ignites not because the content changed, but because prediction briefly failed. So when we design learning spaces, it's not just about delivering information, we're shaping biological states. We are either opening loops or we are closing them, and most often we are doing that way too fast. And once we understand curiosity as something embodied and situational, we stop asking why students aren't motivated and start asking what conditions we've imposed to make that impossible. What would it look like to design lessons that protect confusion instead of eliminating it? It's not an easy answer, and I don't have them all, but it's cool to think about. In the beginning, at least, these things are not pretty. It's hard. Students' brains are so incredibly uncomfortable with ambiguity, and their immediate reaction is often frustration. Yeah, they get angry, girl. But who can blame them, because they have most likely grown up in a world where the adults around them are scurrying around them with label makers, deeming things as right or wrong. I've been called a lot of things, but let me add one more. I'm passionate. Okay, chapter 4, dopamine as anticipation. So a lot of people talk about dopamine as the pleasure chemical, as if it shows up after something good happens, but that's actually not the case. Dopamine is not about reward, it is about expectation. Dopamine is released when our brains predict that something meaningful might happen. It's the chemistry of anticipation, not satisfaction. That spike comes before the outcome, not after. And once the result is known, dopamine drops off. So mystery fuels it, and certainty kills it. This reframes the way that we can think of motivation and engagement in the classroom. Engagement doesn't come from making learning feel good at the end. The end result, I'd argue, is close to meaningless. Dopamine comes from designing moments where the brain senses possibility and where the outcome isn't guaranteed and something is at stake. When we introduce a problem without immediately revealing the solution, dopamine activity increases because the brain is tracking potential outcomes. When we ask a question and wait, actually wait, we create a prediction window where the brain actually leans in and doesn't switch off. This is why over-scaffolding instruction backfires. When every step is spelled out, and there's nothing left to predict, no uncertainty, no anticipation, the nervous system disengages. Again, not because it's lazy, but because there's simply nothing to prepare for. Our nervous systems, over everything else, value efficiency. So they are not going to waste energy to appear a certain way unless we train them to appear a certain way. Gross. For me personally, as a classroom teacher, I will make lesson plans. I'll write it down and talk about what I'm going to do and how I'm going to get there. But I am notorious for never referencing that lesson plan again. I know what I want to teach and how I want to get there, but it's almost never what I wrote down that actually happens in the classroom. Ever. And in those moments where I am tied to my lesson plan for one reason or another, it becomes so incredibly boring and I get sleepy and nobody has any fun because you can never accurately plan for what's going to happen with a group of people. You just can't. So to finish up this chapter, importantly, dopamine is not about pressure. It responds to perceived opportunity and not a threat. High stakes evaluation collapses anticipation into anxiety, but playful uncertainty, where failure is survivable, keeps the system open and exploratory. So when weird pedagogy uses humor, narrative, or surprise, these are not gimmicks. It's a way of keeping the brain in a state of motivated readiness, not chasing rewards, but tracking meaning. Learning doesn't accelerate when we promise outcomes. It accelerates when we hold space for anticipation to breathe. Is it just me, or is this really good? I want you to think about this as you are designing a learning activity. Look for moments that you can leave things slightly unfinished to invite anticipation. And something else I want you to consider here is the way that some folks use pressure to motivate people, or its ugly cousin, fear, as motivation. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We're gonna get into that later. So before we get any further into this, I want to talk about where this season is going. So on screen right now, you're seeing the first of 4 visuals. This season is structured in 4 different acts. So this is Act 1, Foundations of Weird. This is where we are right now. This is where we get our footing. What brains do, why novelty matters, how emotion, identity, and curiosity shape learning before instruction even begins. Act 1 is about unlearning some very stubborn myths about how thinking works. Act 2, Pedagogy in Motion. So this is where things get messy, but in a good way. Attention, humor, story, mistakes, failure, equity, not all of these things as buzzwords, but as lived experiences with neurological consequences. Act 2 is about design, what we signal, what we reward, and what we accidentally punish. Act 3 is brains in the wild, because classrooms don't exist in a vacuum. Systems matter, stress matters, power matters. Act 3 will zoom out and ask what happens when real human brains collide with institutional structures that were never built for them. And finally, Act 4, which is just episode 13. It's the finale, or the synthesis. This is where we will pull all of the threads together, not to simplify them, but to hold complexity honestly. So this final episode is where we'll discuss what it means to teach ethically when we understand how this influence actually works, and what responsibility comes with knowing how easily brains can be shaped. So all of these different episodes will stand alone, but together they will explore this bigger idea of weird pedagogy. This season is not about fixing education, but it's about taking it seriously enough to stop pretending that it's neutral. So if you're watching this season in order, you definitely will feel an arc, but if you're dropping in for a single episode, you'll still have something solid to stand on. That's the roadmap. 4 acts, 13 episodes, and one central question underneath all of it. What happens when we stop asking people to adapt to broken systems and start redesigning learning around how humans actually learn, think, and feel? We're not here to optimize kids. We're not here to hack motivation. We're not here to slap neuroscience onto bad pedagogy and call it innovation. We're here to examine how novelty, humor, narrative, and relational safety actually operate at a neurological level, and what ethical responsibility comes with that knowledge. Some episodes will feel very grounded and scientific. Some, if not all, will feel uncomfortable, and a handful will probably feel way too close for home. Because I look at those audience demographics, I know the majority of you are just like me. But anyway, all of these things are intentional, because weird pedagogy is not just a bag of tricks you're going to sling onto your back of the next bandwagon thing. It's a stance. It's honestly a way of life, and it's a refusal to pretend that learning is neutral or emotionless or somehow detached from our identities. So if you're out here looking for classroom hacks, you're going to be annoyed. But if you're here because you've always felt that school could be warmer, smarter, braver, and more honest than it currently is, you are exactly who this season is for. Thank you so much for watching and getting to the end of this episode. Feel free to read my reference list in the description of this video and go peruse through that at your leisure. Like and subscribe, ooh woo, and I will see you next week for episode 2. And until then, goodbye. Also, do you like my new background? I don't know if I like it yet. I made this myself, and at some point during this season, it's probably gonna come crashing off of the wall, but hey, that will be a prediction error, and then everybody will be really paying attention. I don't know, some of my friends said it's giving nipples. Do you think it's giving nipples? Hell, you probably can't see them. Okay, bye!